Hello, everybody, and welcome to another round of World Talks here on TVP World. My name is Don Arleth. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is on a two-day trip to North Macedonia to further bilateral ties. Hungary also currently controls the presidency of the European Union. In this role, Orbán has extended his hand to help the EU-aspiring nation to solve differences with its neighbors in hopes to one day join the bloc. And now joining me to discuss the fruits of this trip is Senior Fellow at the Center of Euro-Atlantic Integration and Development, Botond Feledy. Hello, sir, and thank you very much for joining me today on World Talks.
Thank you. Good evening.
Well, so it doesn't seem like the biggest breaking news, but let's go ahead and explore it. For Viktor Orbán, why is it essential that he travels to North Macedonia? Why is North Macedonia important for him?
North Macedonia has had elections this spring in May, where the former governing party came back to power. Actually, the party whose previous prime minister has been seeking asylum in Hungary, Gruevski. So Gruevski has been actually evacuated by Hungarian diplomats before his government was handing over the rule years ago, and Orbán has built an excellent connection with the party. So practically, it is more talking about the re-election of this party to the government, and he has timed his visit to this actual election result. And therefore, it means more about the connection between the two politicians and his successors in the party. And we should not forget the other actuality that makes his trip very timely is the fact that Hungary in July announced a €5 million loan to North Macedonia. A loan that was speculated by investigative journalist site V-Square to be coming from China. So actually, Hungary is suspected fronting Chinese credits to the newly elected government party.
Which would be, well, interesting to say the least. Although there's no confirmation, there's no proof of this. It is precarious in that Hungary just received a loan from the Chinese to the tune of $1 billion, I believe it was, during the summer.
Exact. Hungary did receive the 1 billion, that was confirmed, and several diplomats talking to the investigative journalists were saying that potentially this might be rechanneled in 500 million to North Macedonia, as they were also mentioning this amount previously in the campaign promises that they would have this money by the first day of their government.
And it also seems that, well, that Hungary controlling the EU presidency right now, it seems like a prime opportunity that Hungary can show that it's, well, it's trying for the EU's aspirations to expand the bloc. Now, on this front, North Macedonia has some troubles with its neighbors, with Bulgaria, with Greece. How can Viktor Orbán help North Macedonia overcome these issues?
I mean, very few of the candidates in the Balkan are easy candidates. And for Viktor Orbán, this is also diplomatic signaling. He has always been promoting the enlargement in the Balkans and further, but not in the direction of Ukraine. So for him, this is a sort of a game whether he can keep the Balkans enlargement at least as high on the agenda as the Ukrainian enlargement, and potentially he might use it as a chip of bargain upon the moment when these discussions might turn serious. But indeed, you are right that it will not be such a quick process given the difficulties, and that some of the member states might even veto North Macedonia's enlargement or entry to the Union as long as they do not reconcile with the neighbors like Greece.
Now, with this new conservative government there in North Macedonia, what can we expect from them in terms of their stance on Ukraine and Russia, for that matter? Are they more neutralist, pro-Russian? What does it look like from their standpoint?
I mean, the general expectation is that the government's messaging will more coalesce with those parties that Hungary indeed did credit, like Vox in Spain, Le Pen's Rassemblement National in France, or even the friendship with FPÖ and the New Patriotic Bloc in the European Parliament. So they might fall closer to this bloc of thinking and messages, which would definitely mean a more Russia-friendly approach and a less Ukraine-supporting attitude. So that's the expectation for the time being.
For Hungary, it's also important to, strategically, I think, the location of North Macedonia is also important to facilitate the flow of goods to ports down in Greece. Has there been any progress made on that front as far as helping facilitate trade for Hungary and furthering economic ties between North Macedonia and Hungary?
You touch on the right point, because Hungary is one of those rare countries that is still a member of the Belt and Road Initiative of Beijing. And the largest project that Hungary undertook in this framework is the Belgrade-Budapest railway, cargo rail line. And indeed, so that any cargo could reach Belgrade, they need the ports in Greece, and then the train must cross the neighboring countries. So indeed, this is a very good investment point for Chinese, and therefore the loan would make sense, actually, so that they can channel this cargo through the country and potentially reach Belgrade earlier and quicker.
Also, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán is concerned about the effect of sanctions and policies affecting European business. He argues that they slow down economic growth and hinder nation states. And he cautioned that these bans and sanctions are imposed, everyone will lose. So is this a way to hedge his bets a little bit, to get friendlier relations and be able to have an alternative to when these sanctions might actually clamp down a little bit more on the Hungarian economy?
Orbán has been talking about shooting ourselves in the leg since the very beginning of the first sanctions packages accepted by the European Council. He is also trying to find pretext how to explain to the Hungarian voters the dire economic situation in Hungary, as food inflation has been the highest among the EU member states, and Hungary did miss out on the grants from the European Union. So certain grants have been withheld in the conditionality mechanism, and not €1 cent came so far through of the reconstruction fund because Hungary did not fulfill the milestones. So Hungary has a certain issue, therefore several narratives exist that the government created trying to explain the situation. And also, on the other hand, the economic sanctions is something that is a very often returning talking point also of the foreign minister, Peter Szijjártó, and they are always telling that they would be against these sanctions. At the same time, the Hungarian government still always voted it in the European Council with the other European allies. So this is partly for the voting base, electorate base back in Hungary, but also a signaling to the partners in the East. And indeed, you are right that the Hungarian strategy of foreign policy and commerce joined together is talking about connectivity. So that's what we hear most often from the side of the government, that they want to deal at the same time with China as with the EU, which in the era of the competing within the blocs seems to be less and less feasible.
Now, in terms of illegal migration, also Macedonia is important in this. What do you think was discussed concerning illegal migration from Viktor Orbán's point of view, and what does that whole situation look like?
I mean, I must admit that the government spokesperson was very humble on the objectives of the visit, and we see more names of churches being enumerated in this press release than other important points of what negotiations might be about. So I can only speculate that migration potentially might be there. Hungary has been offering help to Serbia, so why not trying to offer some further help to Northern Macedonia? But what is really striking is the wise turn of the visit. He's also meeting Metropolite Timotei, head of the Barkicevo diocese, and he's visiting several churches and other church sites of the church that is potentially also talking to other Eastern Orthodox churches, and also been a pattern lately in Orbán's visit, his relationship with Russia.
Well, during this press conference, I'd also like to kind of switch gears a little bit. Viktor Orbán officially endorsed Donald Trump. I don't think that's very surprising for many of us. The two have been close in the past, and actually Donald Trump frequently cites Viktor Orbán as probably one of his favorite European leaders. But what does this say about the elections in the United States, with so many people getting involved? From President Zelensky has been accused now of being somehow partisan in the elections in the United States. It looks like Viktor Orbán is obviously choosing his sides. Is this a good thing for the countries in our region to choose sides in an electoral process in the United States, which could backfire?
I mean, it is definitely a very interesting development that some East and Central European countries did their bets. I would say Orbán is still quite standing alone with his absolutely open bet on Donald Trump, but actually we must add that he has been doing this since 2016, so since before the first Trump presidency. He was the first European sitting prime minister to endorse already in 2016 Trump's candidacy to the presidency. So he has been on this ticket for more than 8 years. Therefore, it was no surprise that he did meet Trump when he made his trip as head of the EU presidency, first to Kiev, Moscow, Beijing, and then stopping at Mar-a-Lago to meet Trump without stopping at the White House, which was a visible diplomatic faux pas. I would not really mix Zelensky's visit. He has existential interest to secure whichever U.S. president is going to move into the White House, the secure supply of weapons and support. But Orbán, on the other side, on the other hand, has been quite open up until the moment that the ticket was switched between Biden and Harris. He has been very open until midsummer that they have no plan B. He was talking about betting on Trump, and that's the plan, which is, again, a very surprising foreign policy attitude, and quite something that we are not really teaching in schools, not to have a B option. So there is something more to it, and the Heritage Foundation has a very strong relationship with one of the government NGOs. So there are much more connections between the two. Orbán was talking at the Heritage Foundation himself, and they also visited Hungary. So there are strong connections between the MAGA base and Orbán's NGOs and think tanks back in Budapest.
And finally, I'd just like to get your thoughts on what came out just the other day about the statement being made that Hungary should have given advice to Kyiv in February of 2022 not to fight. How is that being discussed in Hungary currently?
That is a statement by Balázs Orbán, the political director of the Prime Minister, and indeed he gave a podcast, and the recording hit the news yesterday. It was very surprising because he was discussing it in the context of 56, so the Hungarian revolution against the Soviet occupation forces back in the 20th century. And all the opposition politicians were shocked by the sentence that actually did mean to lay weapons down instead of fighting back against Russia. Practically, there is a very serious campaign to have him removed from his post, and we should not forget that the 23rd of October is coming up, which is the moment of the yearly remembering to the revolution of 56. So I think it will stay on the Hungarian political agenda, and let's see how actually this will be explained by the government. Viktor Orbán, for sure, this morning, on Friday morning, from Macedonia, did scold his political director that was a mistake to pronounce this sentence, but he did not show any sign that he would force him to resign.
And probably no regrets. Something tells me that the Ukrainians wouldn't have listened anyway. Senior Fellow at the Center of Euro-Atlantic Integration and Development, Botond Feledy, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed exploring these threads with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that concludes this edition of World Talks. Thank you for joining us, and stick around because there's more to come here on TVP World.